afternoon. And to the department, Ndate Swopetsa and may help me again, May Gavenda, and the CEO, Keith Duplessis, and your team, good afternoon. My name is Noko Masipa. I am chairperson of the Portfolio or Standing Committee on Agriculture, Economic Development and Tourism. Like I said, it's exactly 1 o'clock. We are here to receive a briefing by the Department of Agriculture and Casidra on their quarterly report, quarterly performance from July to September 2025. And we'll also be receiving a departmental report of agriculture on the ideal budget required to fulfill its mandate, with specific reference to the implications of the budgetary shortfall or deficit and any additional funding currently being sourced. Will thereafter, honorable members, proceed to resolutions or actions from those presentations, and then it will obviously be moving to consideration and adoption of a draft report, and then also look at the minutes of the 1st, the 22nd, and the 30th October 2025. Before we proceed, I just want to check if we're correct. Are there apologies, Sharon? Just for record, honorable members, with me is Sharon Nikek. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Chairperson. There was an apology from Member Mbombo, and we have Member Leon van Wyk standing in for her, and no further apologies. Thank you.
I think it's Member Vessel, apology. And then
you
Member
correct, Chairperson, yes.
Van Wyk is standing for her. Do we correct at the moment?
Yes, we are, Chairperson.
Okay. So, honorable members, I'm going to hand over to you to just quickly introduce yourself.
Afternoon, Chair. I'm Leon van Wyk. I'm an alternate for Member Vessels.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Dave Bryant, member of the committee. My apologies for being a little bit late.
Thank you, Honorable Bryant. Online.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to all the colleagues. Khalil Brankes, members of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Brankes. Any other person?
Greetings, Chairperson and members. This is Member Nkondlo, member of the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Noel Constable, member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. With that said, I hand over to HOD and to just introduce the department. You're not a lot today, so we're going to allow you to introduce yourself as brief as possible, and then we can go straight to the presentation thereafter. Thank you.
Chairperson and members, good afternoon, and thanks very much for the opportunity. I want to ask my team to introduce themselves, but maybe before they do that, we've got a newest member sitting right at the end. Her name is Stephanie Thomas. She'll be taking over the Directorate Business Planning and Strategy from the 1st of December. And the rest, colleagues, if you can introduce yourselves.
Welcome, Stephanie, to the hot seat.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Lindy Govender, CFO.
Good afternoon, members. Daryl Jacobs, DDG.
Good afternoon, members. Bongiso Matoti, acting DDG, ARS. That's Agricultural Research and Regulatory Services. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, members. Mary James, acting Director, Business Planning and Strategy.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Ida Bezadner, the interim CFO.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Chairperson and members. Keith Duplessis, CEO Casidra.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Michael McKenzie, Program Manager, Food Security and CASP.
Thank you. Honorable members, with that said, I am going to hand over directly to the Department of Agriculture to do their quarterly report, and straight after that, I'll prefer that we go to Casidra and then we handle their questions thereafter, and then we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the briefing by the Department of Agriculture on the ideal budget required. Over to you, Honorable Swopeta. That is Swopeta.
Chair, thank you very much. We want to ask for support from the IT team so that we can load on the MS team so that the members online can see the presentation. We are not online yet.
Okay, do we have, are we calling Siraj? Okay, we getting the IT to assist meanwhile.
Just as part of introduction, I think we, in the second quarter, we're sitting at about 90% achievement in terms of our targets. And I want to say, Chair and the members, it's expected in a biological complex system like ours that you will not be able to reach your 100%. But also suffice to say that year to date, we're sitting at 90%, about 89, 90% in terms of those targets that we set for ourselves. And we are quite sure that by the end of the year, we should be over 95% in terms of what the progress that we are making with respect to the indicators. So my CFO will then take us through that presentation in terms of what has been achieved, and then Casidra, and then I'll come back with the ideal budget as was requested by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, HOD. Let's wait for Siraj to help us with ensuring that the presentation is loaded. Yeah, you go first. Yeah. Yeah, yes. You've been accepted. Over to you, Mekovenda.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Sorry for the delay. We'll just go right into our quarter two performance. Firstly, and then both non-financial and financial, and then after Casidra, HOD will then do the ideal budget as requested. So just in a nutshell, this is just a bit of an illustration of the performance to date that HOD has already alluded to. So in quarter two alone, we have achieved 90% of our non-financial performance targets, which is 74 out of the 82 total indicators. And year to date for quarter two, we have achieved 73 out of the 82, which is an 89% achievement. This is just the detail in terms of each of the programs, where you can see that there's been some non or partial achievement in specific programs, specifically program 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. I'm not going to go through all the detail because we are going to look at further information with the deviations in the upcoming slides. So this is just specifically for quarter 2. We can see at the bottom the 74 out of the 82. And then if you look at the year-to-date non-financial performance summary, you'll see there the 9 that we've not or partially achieved out of the possible 82, which is the 89%. If we then go through the performance for each program, just very briefly, the first one in program 2 is the number of hectares of agricultural land rehabilitated. There was an underachievement of 4,157 hectares, and this was really because of difficult conditions in quarter 2 that's resulted in this lower achievement. However, the overachievement in quarter 1 has mitigated that, and the outlook for quarter 3 is also looking good. So the performance is then expected to be on target, and there's no risk at this point foreseen by the program. If we move to program 3, there's a few targets there that's not been achieved fully. Firstly, number of producers supported in the grain commodity. In terms of this indicator, the target was actually achieved in quarter 1. Due to the seasonality of the planting season, and we had to use some of our own funding because we were still waiting on the grant payments to come through from the DOA. But the year-to-date target or the achievement year-to-date is on track for this indicator. The second one, the number of producers supported in the citrus commodity, there was a deviation of 1, directly linked to the late receipt of the grant payments from the DOA. And here the corrective action is that the CPAC will approve projects in quarter 3 and align the approvals to the indicator schedule. In terms of the number of smallholder producers supported, again, a deviation there of 2, directly linked to the late receipt of the grant payments. And we will obviously ensure then to streamline our implementation to ensure that these targets are met. So there's a bit of catch-up that needs to happen in the upcoming quarters. The number of agricultural projects facilitated within commodity structures, there was a deviation of 10, again, linked to the late receipt of our grant payments and limited own funding. So because of the numbers, we can't unfortunately fund these things with our own funding. We have to then wait for the tranches to arrive from the DOA. The implementation will then start in quarter 3 with also some catch-up in the last 2 quarters. In terms of program 4, the number of visits to epidemiological units for veterinary interventions, a deviation of 476. As indicated in terms of reasons, there's been a number of units that have already been visited during the previous quarter, and therefore that is still within the annual target and still on track. So no corrective actions required at this point. Program 6, number of clients supported with production economic services, a deviation of 2. Largely due to resignation of an official at the start of the quarter, has caused this challenge, and there will be monitoring of performance in the upcoming quarters, again, to make sure that we reach the annual target. Then in program 7, there was one indicator as well that was not met in this quarter, which is the number of participants trained in skills development programs in the sector, a deviation of 28 due to 3 scheduled courses that were postponed due to the adverse weather conditions and unforeseen participant cancellations. Those courses will be delivered in quarter 3, and therefore at this point, no risk identified by the program. Chairperson, if we can move into the financial performance, just very briefly. As you know, our main budget allocation is 1.021 billion. In terms of the spending for the quarter, so for the 3 months, it was 126.9 million, a slight overspend in terms of what we budgeted for the quarter. Year to date, so from April to September, we've spent 750 million, which is 73% of our budget, with the 50% of our period that has expired. The reason there is mainly because of the approval of the cost conditional grant rollover. The approval was obtained in June, so the spending could commence. The budget, of course, is only loaded in terms of the process in the adjustments budget period. So that's why it seems that we've spent more than initially planned, but it's just because of the rollover that's not been included in the budget yet. In terms of quarter 2, just very high level. So we had underspending on cost of employees, and this is really because of slow progress with filling of posts and also new exits during the quarter. there's been underspending on our capital assets, also very much linked to the grant tranche payments, and also then some overspending on goods and services of 2 million and the transfers of 12 million. And that was mainly again due to the fact that we've already started spending on those rolled over grant funding during the quarter. Year to date, again, similar reason, underspending on cost of employees. Our goods and services slightly underspent by 9.7 and capital assets 2.5. And again, the overspending on the transfers, as mentioned, mainly due to the fact that we started spending the CASP approved rollover. This is just illustrative to give you an easier picture in terms of what I just explained. You'll see the COE is slightly behind. Our goods and services is pretty much on track, and transfers has increased. And again, it's because of that spending that has commenced on the rollover. Same with the year to date. You'll see it's a similar pattern there. In terms of the programs for the quarter, you'll see Program 3, Agricultural Producer Support and Development, have spent more than they planned. And this is really because of the late receipt of the grants. So the spending really spiked in quarter 2 because we received the grants in August. So you can already see that they've started spending there to catch up in terms of the time we've lost in quarter 1. And then if you look at a year-to-date picture, you'll see Program 2 is quite higher than planned. And this is the program where that CASP grant is lying for the rollover that was spent. Just very briefly, on our conditional grants, spending year to date, on our CASP projects, we are about 52% spend, which is good in terms of considering the time we received the grant, but also we are halfway through the year. On the disaster funding, which is that rollover, 95% has already been spent. There was a small amount of 2.5 million that we already spent early quarter 3. So that is all spent in terms of what was planned. Ilima Letsima grant, 30.7 million by the end of the quarter, which is 47%. And there's very specific plans on spending for the remainder of the period. Landcare and EPWP, these grants come in small tranches. So as we receive the money, it is spent. Even though it seems that it's on the low side, it's really linked to the grants we get and also when we get them. But there's no risk at this point that we foresee in terms of spending the full amounts. So this was just also to highlight that, of course, receiving our transfers late does put us under pressure to spend, but it also then, more importantly, puts the projects under pressure and the beneficiaries that's supposed to receive the funds. In terms of the revenue, our total revenue budget for the year is 39.6 million. We have collected in quarter 2 about 4.2 million against a budget for the quarter of 2 million. So you can see we've over collected quite significantly. And then year to date, we have collected 21 million, which is 78% already of our total budget. We do have very conservative budgets when it comes to revenue because it is really linked. It's spin-offs of our research and of our activities. We are not revenue seeking, and it is subject to agricultural risk. So we can't set very high figures for revenue, but based on the revenue so far from specifically our veterinary services and research related services, we do foresee that there'll be an over collection again at the end of the financial year. I'm going to stop there, HOD. That is the end of the quarter performance.
Thank you, Mayor Govender. I think, honorable members, we're going to look at the quarterly report from CASIDRA, and thereafter then we'll move to the ideal budget a bit later after we have handled the Q&A, part of the presentations, because I know that honorable members will love to really engage the department on the ideal budget quite thoroughly. So over to you, CEO. Okay. One assist. Okay, you can put your mic on.
Thank you, Chairperson and honourable members. Thank you for this opportunity to present our Q2 results to you. Just move on. Yes, thank you. Casita at this stage have achieved 92.8% of our targets for the quarter. That is 13 of our 14 performance targets. The only target that we haven't achieved was actually achieving an unqualified audit without material findings. Although we've achieved an unqualified audit, we did have some findings, some material findings, and that was the only target not achieved. In terms of household food security projects, we are currently lagging behind, even though we have overachieved in this quarter. In terms of our yearly tracking, we are slightly behind because of the late transfer of funds, and we are confident that we will catch up on this target as the year progresses. And then also just maybe to mention again that we have shifted our targets for this current financial year to align with the SMART principles of target setting. In terms of our targets, for the farms, both Vikral and Wallenstein, the production targets are on track. At this stage, for this quarter, the production for milk was about 172,000 liters of milk. That is about 20% of a planned production for the year, which is on track. So we believe that to have an 10% increase of last year's production figures is on track, and we will probably produce roughly around 833,000 liters of milk. Then in terms of the Lucerne production, Lucerne production typically only happens within Q3 and 4, so hopefully for production figures will be available towards the end of this quarter. In terms of our number of agricultural and environmental projects implemented, we've overachieved there, and that's mainly because we are currently working on eradicating old and delayed projects from our system, which is I think we are on track on removing most of the projects. And I think 2 years ago we had about 300 older projects in the system. At this stage, that is less than 30. So we're confident that we are now eradicating all older projects from our system. In this quarter, we did about 11 interventions for training interventions, and that would be that is for about 300 participants that we assisted the department in facilitating interventions for training. And then in terms of job numbers, we have this is also a new KPI that we are measuring. We've tracked about 3,603 person days for this quarter, and obviously I will speak a little bit more about that in the end of this presentation. Then in terms of food security, we had 45 interventions planned for the quarter. We implemented 45, so there was no deviations there. In terms of household food security projects, again, we implemented 837 projects against a target of 750, and this is the one that I've mentioned earlier that is lagging a bit, and we believe that with our current interventions we will definitely make up these numbers towards the end of the year. And then again here in terms of job numbers for food security, we've actually created about 100 person days of employment, and yeah, so we are on track for that in terms of this quarter. Then in terms of projects implemented for private and public institutions, we completed 2 of those projects, and those are mainly projects that we implemented for Cape Nature, and again this target is on track to be achieved for the year. In terms of other income as a percentage of total income, we're currently sitting at roughly about 30%. However, income generation at Casidra normally takes a shape towards the end of the financial year, and we hope that we will generate some additional income. Although this is one of our toughest targets, and we believe that we might struggle to attain the final numbers as planned, but we are working hard on this and building a pipeline of projects, and some of these projects might materialize even in the next financial year. Then again, in terms of job numbers for this particular program, we're overachieving way beyond what we've planned, and this typically happens because this is a new indicator, and I think next year we will be able to calibrate a little bit better. But at this stage, we've created more than 4,100 person days against a target of annual target of 3,000. So we are overachieving in this particular category, mainly because of the projects that we are doing for Cape Nature, as well as the projects that we're doing for the department in terms of the river works, which creates actually a lot of additional employment. Then in terms of program 4, the target that we haven't achieved at this stage is the annual unqualified audit with no material findings. So I have to just highlight that we have achieved an unqualified audit, but we unfortunately had some material findings, and that has led to us not achieving this particular target. Obviously, we want to set the bar a bit higher than just getting an unqualified audit, and we believe that the corrective measures that we're putting in place will bring us back towards a clean audit status. Then, in terms of a number of wellness initiatives implemented, we've done 11 against a target of 10, and even there we are tracking slightly ahead of what we're supposed to be doing for the year. We're sitting at about 21 interventions at this stage for the year, and then also for a number of outreach events that has been arranged. Obviously, we're building our brand, we're putting our brand out there, so we are looking at attending more events, attending more expos and things like that. So at this stage, we've done 13 of these events against a target of 10. In terms of how we track with the budget per program, at this stage we are, if you look at the expenditure column, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 column, we're sitting at about 46% of our expenditure against the budget, which is roughly on track. I mean, we are half of the year. So in terms of expenditures, I think everything is on track. The pressure lies, as I mentioned, in terms of our income that we are generating, and income generation is a bit slow at this stage. In terms of program 3, you'll see that only 11% of that particular program has been expended, and that is mainly because of the appointment of a business development consultant that we wanted to start for earlier in the year. That only happened in September. So that means that only a part of that budget could be expended. However, we hope that particular action will assist us in generating more income, not only in this particular financial year, but going forward. With that said, Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Honorable members, those are the presentation for Q2. I am happy to take hands. Hands in the room. I see no hand, one hand. Honorable Bryant, Honorable Van Wyk, and online, Honorable Nkondlo, in that order. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson, and thank you for those presentations. My question is less of a question and more of, I suppose, just an observation, a point. I'm sure Member Van Wyk will ask some more cutting questions from his side. But it's just in terms of Casidra, and I think it was mentioned around the events. And I mean, there's a lot of really, really good work that's being undertaken by Casidra. And I think, we've seen during the annual report process, and a lot of the work that I think is taking place was shown. And I think, you've mentioned attending more of these events. I think it really is an opportunity, maybe going forward, to try and showcase more of what Casidra is doing. I think people know the other entities very well. They know Westgrow, they know Cape Nature, they know the other entities, and there's a lot of publicity around them. But I really think that you could benefit from showcasing some of these great projects that you're involved in. But apart from that, I think it's a very detailed explanation. I don't think it requires any more questions from my side. But thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Bryant. Honourable Van Wyk.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think thank you for the presentations. Certainly I'm not fully aware of what always goes on within the department as such, but it's always a great pleasure to be able to be with you here. We constantly see this issue on filling vacancies and these circulars that seem to be being a hindrance, if I can use that word. What is the real issue there? Because it's something that every department seems to be struggling with. Is it to some extent a deliberate hindrance that's been put in the way as to a sort of a drag that the vacancies don't get filled, that we don't get up to speed? So I suppose that's the one aspect. The other aspect that interests me are these household food security projects. And it's something that I've experienced at municipal level as well, and how to get them sustainable. Is there, to me, one of the issues has been you've got to keep the enthusiasm going of the little household gardener and making that person prepared to continue producing. And to do that, he almost needs to have the satisfaction that the produce he's producing is being used, and maybe he's getting some form of remuneration or credit for what he's doing. And I've just been thinking, is there some way, and I'm not sure whether you're possibly doing it, that one can make use of through a social media, through a WhatsApp or SMS type system, that can go to a central point that there's so many carrots, there are so many beans or whatever are coming online on a certain particular day, and that there's perhaps some form of a collector within a municipality, even if that then gets used in some form of a social development area or in the soup kitchens and in that there's some form of, call it remuneration, that follows back, so that one can almost start creating that level of a market that gets done. And it's just a thought process that I've just had looking at this once again on what one does, because to me it's a facilitating role that needs to take place. I think we often are very quick go and say, oh no, we must have a market, a produce market. But I think the level of sophistication in terms of commercial farming is perhaps a little bit, it's moved away from the markets that we used to have maybe 3 or 4 decades ago in the process. So I'm just trying to think, on stimulating some form of thought process in that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Van Wyk. Honourable Ngondlo, and I see the hand of Honourable Stoffel as well. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, there's maybe more clarity first I need from the department, because I'm just trying to understand the delay in the transfer of funds by the Department of the National Department in this context, which is the grant funding. but also the rollover. If they can just be slow in making one to understand, especially a rollover that has been applied for and approved. What I'm understanding is that those particular rollovers would have been allocated or to be allocated during the adjustment budget. So maybe if I can just get clarity by when a rollover that has been approved would then find allocation in the budget of the department for that specific program, including the lateness. If you can just be specific when you say there is a delay, when will that delay be? And what is the meaning that the department would have spent funding? Because in some, I think, of the explanation, it was indicated in anticipation for the money that is already approved, the department would already spend some of that money. That's my assumption. If I'm not correct, please explain. But where it is correct, against what budgets do you then spend if the actual money has not been allocated? I'm just trying to understand that so that, in my head, both timing and both the budget windows that gets to be spent, one is able to understand particularly the risk and the impact of these delays, of the allocations, either from national government or either, from some of the rollover funds. So that's my first question, Chair. I just want to understand from the department. But also I'm interested to know from the department that when we look at their performance, I think from the HOD, there was an indication on the non-financial performance that the department is already 90%. I think 90% to 89% year to date, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm trying to understand whether is this for the entire financial year or it is referring this percentage for the actual quarter. So that's the question that I'm trying to understand. And then one is interested then to say, when you, in some of these targets that were partially achieved, as an example, when you say in program 3, the number of producers supported in the grain economy, the target was 1. And it says deviation -1. I don't know what's the meaning of a -1, but the over and above that, I'm trying to understand how many producers are in the grain commodity space, and how would have then the department arrived at targeting 1? And this is a similar logic I'm trying to understand with the number of producers in the citrus commodity. So the question for me is that, when we look at the source of the support that the department would have provided to the number of smallholder producers supported, it says the target is 10. And I'm interested, what is the baseline of what the department would have achieved the previous, but generally in the province, how many smallholder producers that would have required the support of the department versus what the department would have targeted, obviously based on the resources available to them. So if maybe from the department, one can just understand those particular issues. And then on the issue of the underspending on cost of employees due to slow progress, can the department just be specific here? With jobs, with which vacancies are we referring to here? The level of those jobs, why, what is, just spell it out in simple, straight terms. What is the delay what is the slow progress of filling these vacancies? Because I think we know by now that come end of the financial year, we will be dealing with this of the previous financial year annual report, and we'll be dealing with this, as something that continues. I'm just asking specifically on this one, what would have been with jobs, which vacancies are we referring to specifically? And then lastly, Chair, to Casidra. I'm interested in Casidra to understand this audit, this unqualified audit with material findings. Can they explain, can once again they be specific, explicit, what were the material findings and what is being done by Casidra to remedy or to correct those material findings? But we want to know what are the material findings that were identified for them not to achieve this particular target. And for me, Chair, when it comes to this notion of food security, I'm just interested to understand from Casidra, between the indicator 2.1.1 and 2.1.2, what is the difference? What's the difference between a community food security project versus the household food security projects? Are we talking about food gardens here? And and how would the difference from the department's point of view between that one that is called a community food security project versus the household, and who the one of community is feeding? And actually, where are these food security projects? What would have helped or directed Casidra? Is it any data that would have directed which areas? And I'm raising this, Chair, that because I think one at once in the House was asking the Premier this particular issue, because food insecurity is becoming a serious issue in the province. And there is actually a data that has been produced by the likes of UCT, actually in the question to the Premier. One pulled the data from UCT that was saying, particularly Guguletu and Khayelitsha are two areas where there is a spike of households that are food insecure. So I'm not sure whether one would find these households, being the ones that are being served by these projects of food security by Casidra. So if maybe colleagues can just give clarity around that and explain what is the meaning of number of jobs created measured in person days. What is that particular conception? What does it mean? What type of jobs are these? How many days? Is it a contract job? Is it a 2 days job? I'm interested just to understand, within the context of the growth for jobs strategy of the province. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Ngondlo. Over to you, Honorable Stoffer.
Thank you, Chairperson. Am I audible, Chair?
You're audible, ma'am. You can proceed.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and very good afternoon to everyone in the House and also online. And a special greetings to the departments and also Casidra. Chair, my question will be based to Casidra. I want to welcome all reports, by the way. The reports of the department and also the report of Casidra. However, Chair, in terms of Casidra, yes, there is a great performance, good performance, but slightly there is some uncertainties in certain so on certain slides. So, and I want to be clarified by them as CASIDRA themselves. My first question is based on the target production. They have referred to the various farms, what they are producing and all these things. So mine is based on Amalingsteen. I want to check with CASIDRA the finalization of the process of the ownership of the farm to the correct beneficiaries. How far is that process? Then the second one is that in terms of the production on the farm, the purpose of the farm was to serve the people of Zoa. But currently that farm is out and in for profit making. I want to know, when is the actual purpose of the farm going to be utilized as being prescribed the purpose of the farm for the community of Kanaland or the community or Zoa by the CASIDRA. Then my other question is based on the delayed project. There was an indication that was inserted that there was more than 300 delayed projects, but now they end up to 30. Where's that project? I want to know where's that 30 project and what is that project? And then in terms of the training, intervention was being done, 300 participants. Who is that participants? Where are that participants? And that participants, yes, where are those people? And then the other one is that in terms of the food security and household food security, I think Member Kondlo have partly covered me there. But we want to know. I think my chairperson, Member David, have indicated. I think it's high time to let's concentrate on showcase now. In terms of this, where is this food security gardens? Where are they? Because in our areas, rural areas, you don't see these things. You just hear about it, but you don't see it. In my area specific, I was looking around. I went to the local agriculture office. I went and queried there to say, where's these gardens? I want to see these gardens, but there's none. The only one is in Van Wyksdorp. That is 45 km from town. So I think we need more a broad explanation in terms of, and we need evidence now. We are tired of this paperwork. People come with nice paperwork, but we need now practicality. Want to see that. And my last one, Kay, is in terms of 21 intervention. What was this intervention and where was the intervention? Especially in program 3. Thank you, Chair. And then also, Chair, in terms of the farms, I hear you mention that it's Amalingsteen and there's another farm. There's another farm here that we don't know of, also under CASIDRA. Or CASIDRA must at some stage give us a status of that farm. And that farm is Middlecoast Farm. We don't hear about that farm in the books of CASIDRA. We don't hear about that farm in the books of agriculture itself. We don't hear nothing but about that farm. Is there a way we can get a status around that farm? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, I'm also going to sponsor some questions, but I also want to also remind members that some of the questions that I've listened now, We have got some written answers, which we will avail them once again to honorable members so that members can also go through those answers. I'm not going to be specific around the questions that were asked, but Sharon just reminded me that we have got answers in some of these questions. Secondly, what I want to say is that Medelbos Farm is a farm that was obviously purchased by the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development under the program, if I'm correct, a PLUS program. So if a farm is purchased by the Land Reform and Rural Development, it is their farm. The work of the department is obviously to support with production inputs, but obviously it depends on the lessee of that particular farm if he or she apply for that particular support. That's how it works. Unfortunately, the department is not going to just walk on the farm and say that this is what we want to do on your farm. The owner or the lessee will have to come out to the department and indicate his or her needs. Honorable members, I've got a few questions as well, because I think it's very important that we interrogate quarterly reports so that, you know, when they table the annual reports, we have dealt with some of the issues here earlier than, you know, towards the end. I do want to support Honorable Bryant in saying that maybe, you know, a complete overhaul of reporting from CACIDRA is required. Is the recommendation that we're going to make, you know, going forward, so that, you know, members can really be able to engage the report properly, you know, and understand, you know, the nitty-gritty. And I think the way that Westgro, as Honorable Van Wyk said, you know, Westgro present their report, maybe, you know, is one of the areas that can really be used to really just unpack it a little bit and to ensure that members, you know, are able to really find the answers that they are looking for. With regards to unqualified audit with material findings in this particular quarter, this was reported in the annual report that was tabled. Why is it coming into this quarter? Because as far as I'm concerned, the 12-month, you know, audit is still coming for this particular, you know, feedback. So that's my question there. Also on CACIDRA, with regards to milk production there, I just want to get a feel. What is the number of cattle that are milk producing cattle? And in terms of their capacity, what is the liters that they produce per day? Maybe, you know, further to that is that, are they really at their, call it their maximum level? Can you really improve in terms of the milk production there? You talk about jobs on program 1.2 and 3, and I think to Honorable Ngondlo's question is, what type of jobs are we talking about really in terms of, are they temporary jobs? Are they long-term jobs? And how do you monitor in terms of really the jobs that are being created if they are retained in the areas that they are? The next will obviously be to the Department of Agriculture and the CASP discussions. We have written letters to National Treasury, we've written letters to Department of Agriculture. I just want to really understand if there has been any movement between your engagement with your national counterpart in terms of re-looking at that CASP allocation and especially regionalizing it to ensure that you are able to support your farmers effectively. And the other question is, obviously you had delays in terms of CASP support. So how are the farmers really affected by this particular delay? Are we going to see less production from the smallholder farmers in terms of their contribution? And I think one of the key question is that our farmers, obviously, when they produce, they send to the market, and some send directly, to export and so forth. Is the department working on a system whereby they can really be able to ascertain as to how much of their small producers' products are on the shelves at Spar, at Pick and Pay, or at the market, or is being exported? If the department has that details, would you mind really sharing with the committee in terms of how you're tracking, how you are developing your smallholder from being a smallholder to an emerging farmer to ultimately becoming a commercial farmer? That's it from my side. Over to you, HOD and CEO, and then we can do follow-up once you have answered our questions. Thanks.
Chair, thank you very much. The list is very long. We'll try our best to respond. If I can start with your questions, Chairperson. The council discussions, they are still continuing. There's no decision yet as to provincializing that fund. With respect to farmers that have been commercialized, I don't think we have that data, but Bongi can respond to that question. And the difficulty of that question is that we encourage farmers to work together in the province, and they would export through their agents and partnering with their commercial colleagues, which for us is positive because we don't want to create two streams of agriculture. But of course, the argument you are raising is a very important one about commercialization of new farmers. But Bongi can just maybe provide more details if she's got after I've responded to some of the things. Member Stoffel, the question on Amalienstein, I think that's for Casidra to respond to. The delays of the 300 projects, that's for Casidra. The issue around the training, who participates and all that, I think it's joint, is between Casidra and ourselves, but we can provide a list of the people that are trained and the allocation as to where they come from, because that's important. We have that data, that's how we report to the Auditor General as well in terms of what we would have done. The whole issue of food security, I would wish that perhaps at some point we have a presentation to the committee as to our understanding of food security, because many times we tend to make it an agricultural problem. It's not an agricultural problem, it's not a production problem. Because if you look at the problem of food insecurity in our land or in our province, it's really about the fact that people don't have the necessary purchasing power to access the food that is available. And not everybody that is poor or food insecure need a food garden. We must also accept that some people would rather have a job than having to produce their own food. And I think that it's important that is brought to bear, because the South African challenge is that we talk about food security as if it's a production issue. If that was the case, we wouldn't be food insecure in our country, because we produce so much that we even export. But I think Casidra can reflect on what is a food garden and what is a household garden. I would like them to respond to that. I think Member Nkondo raised a number of questions. I'm going to respond to 4 of those, and the one on budget and reallocation, I will leave that to my CFO. The issue around 90% is for the second quarter. That's the output for the second quarter. And 89 is year to date. In other words, if you combine second and first quarter, 89% is the output for the department. It's not for the whole year. It's up to the end of September, which is the second quarter. The question around the baseline, we know that in the Western Cape, there's about 17,000 farmers, 10,000 smallholder farmers, and about 7,000 commercial farmers. That's based on the data that we generated, I think, some 10, 12 years ago, which was conducted under Bongi's program. And if you say, how do we set our targets? We set our targets based on, one, the applications that farmers apply for support from us, but two, based on the budgets you have. I can tell you, for instance, that what we're supporting or the number we support is far less than what we ought to be supporting, necessarily because we don't have the necessary resources to meet that. And in fact, the next presentation will articulate the argument for more funding based on the applications we received. We have about 200 million of CASP, and I think the needs, it's about 700 million. So obviously, there's much more demand for support than what we can provide support for. In terms of the spending on the rollover, I leave that to the CFO. But the delays on CASP, and I think if this committee can help us, is to help us to push the national agriculture, that funding is released in the first month of the new financial year. Because we received our funding this year in August, which was already at the end of the first quarter of the year. And that on its own is a limit to what farmers can do, because many of them on the land reform farms in particular rely on the support. And if it doesn't come on time, there are real issues. I think with respect to the slow progress and delays on the COEs, we are happy to share the details. But I must say that the internal processes take some time, but also it's difficult sometimes to recruit in our science field. Not everybody wants to come work for government because of the paying. When we compare with the banking sector, for instance, if you look for economists, that's the reality, but we are happy to share those details. And in some instances, we've had to advertise positions once or twice, and at times 3 times, before you get the candidate that will say, yes, I'm willing to work for the state. But we're happy to share that details with the committee if it is so required. I think the same question was raised by Member Van Wyk on these delays. There was a circular in 2023 October that was putting some kind of handbrakes on appointments within government, whereupon we had to get concurrence of the Premier to fill any post within all our departments, but that was withdrawn sometime April this year. Now the decision is now resting with me, because even then it's important that I manage between COE and ability to provide services. There are departments, some of national departments that we are aware of, where people are paid, but there are no funds for them to do their work. And I don't want that in the department. So the balancing is quite important for us. The idea around social media platforms for food gardens, I think it's a very good one. It is something that I think Darrell and team might need to look at. Suffice to say, in the city of Cape Town, we work with a group called Abalimi Basekaya. And I think they have got that aggregator model where they pull in these vegetables and market them in the formal chains. But I do think the point is a very important point. That's something that we may need to explore to see the extent to which it could help us. In terms of sustainability, I think it's about exciting the people, exposing them to farmers' days and regular trainings and so on and so forth. But in the end, Chair, I think it rests with the person, him or herself, whether they want to continue farming. But suffice to say that the results of our food garden study, the impact study, which we did, I think a year ago, it demonstrated that it was about 65% success thereabouts in the household gardens, which for us was still great, because if you compare that with the global standards of 10% successes in agriculture businesses, that was a great fit for us. I think those are the questions. I'll ask Bongi to respond to the issue around the smallholder farmers' produce, and Lindy just to talk about the rollover, the delays, and how does that get to happen. Thanks, Bongi, and then the CFO.
Thank you so much, Ejudi, and thanks to Chair for the question. With regards to tracking the produce of smallholder farmers, whether it reaches the market actually or not, whether locally or abroad, there is no one system where we're actually doing that, but there are means and ways actually of how we actually get to see the progress. The first is actually the study that we usually do after every 3 years on land reform, because those farmers, the farmers that are actually supported by the department, and in terms actually of the questionnaire that gets to be put together, there are economic questions, and one actually of the questions is around actually issues of market access. Then we're actually able to get an indication as to what is actually the progress. But again, in most actually of our producers, we are actually working with our commodity organizations. So with those systems actually in place, we are actually able to know where does that actually produce actually get to, and if you are actually in an export oriented actually commodity, definitely actually we know which producers are actually exporting. So, and through actually the various programs that we're actually also, able to implement, especially around compliance. So we are actually able to know whether that produce actually gets into the local market, or are we certifying you so that you can actually access, the export market. So there are those, mechanisms in place that we actually get to use, Chair. Thank you so much.
CFO.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Member Nkondlu. I'll just briefly touch on the matters raised. So firstly, I think HOD touched on the matter of the delays in the funding, in the fact that we've received it only in August, even though there were payment schedules provided for payments much earlier. And we've also budgeted for some spending happening in Q1. But I think the main reason was the delays in the approval of the national budgets. I think this was the first year we did not have an approved budget on 1 April, which came with its own challenges, I think also at the national level. And I can only assume that played a big role in them not making those payments as initially planned in terms of the payment schedules with National Treasury. But it is an ongoing conversation. We've also pulled in our own Treasury to assist us to work with the DOA and put some pressure through National Treasury perhaps to push towards payments being on time, as it does affect us severely. Just then quickly on the rollover, so the member is correct in saying that the 300 million was allocated to us in the adjustments budget of 24-25. You will recall that the actual payment was only made to us on the 26th of March, which was 3 working days before the end of the financial year. And we therefore then, on the advice of our Treasury, our own minister and HOD, we agreed to then rather request for an expedited rollover to not try and spend within 3 working days, which we did. And the Treasury, National Treasury then came back and approved or granted that approval in June. I think it was the 15th of June. So the consequence of that basically is that because the money was not surrendered, you keep the cash by the Provincial Treasury. So we then had access to start spending the money from a cash flow perspective, because the money was with the Provincial Treasury, and we got the go-ahead from the Treasury to start spending, because they also understood the urgency for us to start spending, because it was for recovery after disasters. So that could happen, even though the actual 300 million will now be added again in this financial year in the adjustments budget, which is now November. So you'll see that rollover that was approved will be added in the adjusted appropriation of this financial year, which will then align the spending and the budget again. I hope that answers the question. I think maybe just quickly on the question around the target that we said we provided funding from our own money. This was specifically on the grain one, where it is particularly linked to a planting season. And if we did not assist and use our own funding, that beneficiary would have missed an entire season with dire effects. So it was a decision then made in the department to utilize its own budget to assist in terms of reaching that target in the APP. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, CFO. I think Honorable Nkondlu will probably do a follow-up, but I think the question was really primarily to say, you have this rollover of 300 million, but you still have this, which is named CASP, but you still have these projects that are not really being fulfilled because of the money, but you had the rollover. Yet you had the rollover. But there was a question with regards to targets. Is it Casidra that is going to speak to regarding citrus and so forth? It's not because you had a question with regards to those numbers as to how do you determine that only this one and so forth. Maybe if you can really touch on that one as well.
Yeah, we receive applications from all commodities in the province. And the value last year, I think it was about 700 million rands. That's the requests, the quantum of the requests. And through the commodity approach, which has got various committees, we assess those requests based on criteria. And based on the budget, then we're able to fund. But equally, we have our own priorities in the province. You would know that there are some key commodities that always get the bulk of the funding, for instance, the fruit sector, because a very strategic one, and it generates a lot of jobs. I mean, for every hectare, you get about 2.3 persons employed per hectare. And that for us is important to align it to the growth for jobs strategy of the province. So in a nutshell, we would receive 20 applications and we would fund only 2 or 3 based on the resources, because we just don't have enough money to fund everybody that applies.
I think the question is still not answered. I'm sure Honorable Ngontlo will come back again, because you've got a target of 1 and you've got a minus of 1. But over to you, CEO of Casidra.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson. We've got a number of questions as well. First of all, I just want to agree with Honorable Brian that we believe that, and also yourself, Chairperson, that we will probably have to do a little bit more in terms of getting ourselves out there, and we are doing there's considerable changes at Casidra in terms of how we brand ourselves through social media and things like that, and that is bearing some fruit, and we are seeing a lot of walk-ins and a lot of financial institutions, for example, approaching us now to see whether we can't work together. So we're working on that. In terms of the household and community food security program, I'll hand over to the program manager for that specific program. And then in terms of the question of Honorable Van Wyk, the aggregation model, I think HOD mentioned that there are programs that we are starting to develop now to see whether we can't aggregate crops. In fact, we went out on a process called an expression of interest to see whether we can't get external parties to work with us to develop projects, and we've actually there's a couple of them that came to us with nice models, especially using blockchain, for example, and people need to then just log onto their phone and get access. So we're working on things in the background to see whether we can't aggregate these crops from these small farmers to create sort of a circular type of economy especially for the food gardens as well as the community gardens. But Michael can speak more to the question from Honorable Nkondlo in terms of the community versus household food gardens. Then Honorable Nkondlo had a question in terms of the audit, and then I'll hand over to the interim CFO to just deal with that one. Then there were questions in terms of where the projects are located. Again, Michael will touch on that. Honorable Stoffels spoke about the farms and finalization of the transfer of the farms. I think at this stage we are setting up the actual entities on the both farms to actually be able to receive the farms. However, at this stage, there's a lot of things going on in the background where we're training individuals, making sure that they are ready to accept the farms. I think the minister was clear that we will not transfer the farms if the community is not ready to accept those farms. Obviously, we don't want another failed transfer of a state asset. So I think it's important that we want to make sure that that the community is ready to accept. And what is happening now is there is a plan, a turnaround plan that was developed for both farms, and we are busy working through that plan. And part of that plan is the training interventions that is happening at this stage. And I think it's earmarked to be transferred around about 2030 at this stage. If we can get the communities ready before that, then so be it. But I think a lot of money would be required to make those turnaround plans actually feasible. I think both farms would require in the order of 100 million rand to be invested into those farms to make sure that those farms are actually feasible. And we are working closely with the Department of Agriculture to make sure that we are starting to implement certain aspects on those farms that is low-hanging fruit, if I can put it that way. Then again, there were questions about the delayed projects, and maybe Michael can touch on the delayed projects. The fact that there's about 30 of those projects, I can just mention at this stage, delayed projects is mainly around EIAs, water use licenses, municipal approvals, things that these projects were approved, but not all of the necessary not all of the necessary issues were in place to make sure that these projects can be implemented immediately or quickly. And I think that is maybe a flaw that was picked up, and now currently we are not approving projects that doesn't have water use licenses, that doesn't have EIAs in place, so that we actually don't sit with projects that are actually on the system, but it cannot be implemented fairly quickly. So that is things that we've learned over the past number of years now, and we are implementing those things. So, but again, Michael can speak to where those projects are and what we are currently doing to actually get them off the system. Again, then the Honourable Masipa, you answered the question around middle post. I think at this stage we are not involved there. I think we had a fencing project there a couple of years back, but at this stage we are not involved in that farm at all. Then again, Honourable Masipa, your comments around the complete overall of the reporting, I agree, and I think we will definitely. In fact, we're already looking at that, making sure that we spoke about at least having also a food security tracker, those type of things that we so that we can have a monthly update in terms of how food security projects are being implemented, and again we will probably need some funds to make sure that we can do that properly, but we are definitely working on something. Then why is the audit in this audit? It's simple because the audit is completed in around about August, and because it's completed in August, then we can report on it. We actually had a talk. We talked to Treasury this morning. Sorry, the Office of the Premier about this morning. Is that obviously you cannot have the audit for this current year in this current year's KPIs. It's impossible because we will only have the outcome of this year's audit in August next year. So we will always be lagging, and that's why we'll be doing it in Q2, but it can easily sit in Q3 or Q4. I think at this stage, it's just because of the actual audit outcome is in August. That's why we keep it in Q2. I hope that answers that question. Then what is the milk producing figures per animal? I just had it here. It's about 17 liters, 17.9 for this quarter, 17.9, and our target is 18. Annual target is about 18 liters per cow per day, and it's currently sitting at about 17.9. Year to date, it's 16.26 liters per animal, which is actually we're getting there. So I must also mention that Lactalis is buying the milk from the farm, and Lactalis has over the past 2 years actually spent quite a number of CSI funds on the farm. They're actually currently upgrading the dairy parlor, and equipment was ordered from overseas, and that has just arrived. So there's nice activity on the farm at this stage where the dairy is actually being upgraded. In fact, next week the CEO of Lactalis will be there, so we will actually go out and see him. Then there was a question on job figures. What are these job figures? It's person days. So what happens is that we only measure the work performed by the service providers. So this is not the project itself. It's the service providers that are actually providing a service to Casidra and to the beneficiaries, and we measure the time spent on that project. So it's all part-time jobs. It's jobs that are actually measured when you clock in, when you clock out, and if it's 5 days, then it will be 5 person days. What we then do is we can translate that to a 220 work year, a year, day work, a day per year work. And at this stage, we're sitting at around about 33 jobs, permanent jobs that we've been creating. If we would calculate at 220 days jobs per year. So I think we're tracking that. It's something new that we're tracking. It's similar to our public works would track jobs. It's a person days. It's our public works would also look at or infrastructure would track jobs. So let me quickly hand over to Michael and then also to the CFO.
Again, Chair, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, CEO. Members, I will answer Kontlu and Member Stoffel's question regarding 2.1, number of community food security projects implemented, and the difference between the two. 2.1.1 is community food security project. That can be a livestock project that include poultry. It can also be a livestock project that can include sheeps, and then it can also be a community garden or a school garden being approved. Now, if you look at the type of projects, especially in this is your bigger projects that can from 30,000 to 250,000 per financial year. And that's right through the province in the 8 districts of the Department of Agriculture. And this project's been approved on the scoring of 60% at your commodity, food security commodity. Then if you look at the difference between the household, that can include a backyard garden, or it can include a chicken house with chickens and feed and a chicken structure. The income for a household to qualify, it's 5,600 total income per household, and that household's been identified by the Department of Agriculture's officials in the different districts, or community groups or NGOs that identify with municipal officials, CDWs, in specific areas. And I can also just mention, Chair, that 45% of the food security budget for households going to the metro area, City of Cape Town, and that include Guguletu, Khayelitsha, Mamre, Makaza, Nyanga, Delft, Strand, Atlantis. The Department of Agriculture also have a new approach with walk-ins at the offices, where they have seed packs available for households that didn't apply for a food garden package. Now, the food garden package include a backyard garden that will include seedlings. It will also include garden tools. It will also include fertilizers and a small piece of safety net, to the total amount of 3,600 per financial year per household. And that's been covered through the whole province. If there's funds available from the Department of Agriculture or from Beer Olifant Catchment Management Agency, then they will also receive a water tank, 1,800 liter or 2,500 liter. That also put not strength on the municipal water resource. And all these projects, including the community gardens, being identified, and it's also through an approach of applying every quarter the food security CPEC sitting with applications from right over the province, and they've been scored and approved. And if funds available, it's been implemented. Then on old projects, delay in old projects, we are busy looking into old projects that was in the system due to building plans that wasn't approved as looted by the CEO. This is now we have a management engagement meeting with the Department of Agriculture top management that all these projects will be out by the end of March 2026 to get them out of the system. Some of them was also delayed due to payments, labor payments, and that's also been resolved.
Thank you, HOD. Sorry, the CFO.
Thank you, Chair and members. Just some feedback on the unqualified audit with material findings on non-compliance. The finding was that it's on the 80/20 preference point system that was not mentioned on the RFQ templates that went to suppliers, although we did apply each quotation and we did evaluate each supplier on the 80/20 preference point system. So on the audit finding, they've listed 12, which now made it material. If you add up it becomes like 1.1 million. We did correct the RFQ template immediately. It was updated, it was implemented, and it forms part of the RFQ published. And we immediately implemented training for the staff again to make sure that everybody is aware that it must be sent out with every single RFQ. So I believe that we have put the right internal controls in place not to have this finding again in the future. Thank you.
Once again, my apology. Thank you very much for that feedback. Honorable members, those are the answers. Are there follow-ups? I don't see hands in the house. I don't see hands online. Or I see Honorable Ngondlo, Honorable Stoffel. No hands in the house. Over to you, Honorable Ngondlo and Honorable Stoffel.
No, thank you, Chair. Chair, I think maybe starting on this issue of food security, I think perhaps it's a discussion as the HOD was alluding. You know, through you to the HOD, it's one issue to say food insecurity is not an agri problem. But amongst other things, and there is evidence to this effect. One level is food inflation, which is prices of food, which are a function of the agri processes. And one recalls the very presentation of the Department of Agriculture during the COVID times, where amongst others, HOD, if you would recall, the issue of food production in South Africa and also in the province, and the cost of manufacturing food in South Africa is quite hefty. And that is why, correctly, as you are stating, that whilst South Africa is a food basket, and Western Cape in particular, of the country, but also the world, it is unable to feed its own people. So it cannot be a matter that is removed from the agri process. And also the notion of the food waste, another a fault line within food production. And again, evidence has proven that that food waste does not only happen at the level of the household, whilst they also contribute, but it also happens at the level of production. let alone in between production, through the entire value chain up until retail to the end user. So these are realities that we must be dealing with when we talk about food insecurity. It is agriculture is part of that ecosystem. So it can in any way be removed from the current problem of food security. But the argument you are making, actually for me, it's a discussion that becomes important of saying, is the food garden the response to food insecurity? And I would have thought, as a department that is a shareholder over CACIDRA, that should be a conversation between yourselves and CACIDRA when you are doing compacting with CACIDRA on whether, and this actually comes to my follow-up question, Chair, even with CACIDRA, has CACIDRA made, or when are they doing an impact study on the food gardens? Because until we can then understand what is the theory of change, what are we seeking? Are we saying with these food gardens, they are contributing or they become a food security response? Because as we are talking, we didn't come up with the notion of food gardens as food security. They are written in the departmental annual plans. They are written in CACIDRA plans. It is CACIDRA who says food security, and their indicators, as we're saying, 2.2, 2.1.1, 2.1.2. It's in CACIDRA, because to them, food security equals food gardens and the other initiatives. So I think it's important that we get to that particular conversation, because it's an important conversation. But it's important for us to say, what is it that we are doing, and we're using what Michael, I think, indicates, the 3.6 per garden per household, which is coming from the public purse. What is that money? If we're to ask for value for money, what value in dealing with food insecurity in those specific households can we say that investment is bringing home? So I think for me, that is a conversation that indeed we ought to be having, and we must get clarity from the department. And I'm asking CACIDRA, are you, or when are you going to be doing impact study on, in as far as the food security projects or food gardens in particular, as a contribution or as the main response to food insecurity in those households and in those communities that you had already identified, which is why I was asking, where are these projects? Because science has told us where the problem of hunger is actually at. So I think that is an issue that I wanted to understand. The second one, I think, as a follow-up, Chair, is actually on this issue of the allocations. Actually, the CFO has answered. The only issue I wanted to be clear on is that as and when the budget shall only be declared during the budget adjustment that is still coming, and already there's a spending of money, against which budget window is the money that is still to be declared into the near future, which is now in December, when the Minister of Finance present the budget adjustment, So against which money did the spending take place? Because it is confirmed that, yes, because rollover, my apologies, because rollovers were approved, if we're talking about the same thing. So what I'm trying to understand is that because of pressure, the department had to spend. I'm trying to understand, just as a simple person who is non-financial, when you have to spend on money that you are still going to receive, who finances that? Where do you take that particular money? So if you can just explain that to me. And then, Chair, I would think what the HOD was asking around engaging the national department, perhaps when we do our resolutions, we have to request the minister of Agriculture to actually come to the committee. And really, because we have been talking for some time, I think even in the last parliament around this this notion of delayed grant funding and their impact, I think to, you know, the applications that the likes of CASIDRA and the department as mandate, you know, so perhaps we need to think about inviting the national minister and engaging on these issues and find a way of how can we actually deal with this problem. And as we do that, we must actually attend to the very issues that member Stoffels was asking. Because whilst I acknowledge that the Middle Post farm, you know, was a project of national, once those farms are given to the individual beneficiaries, the provincial department and the provincial agriculture has got a role to play. That is why the fencing and the other things that happens in those particular farms. So we can't now want to create, you know, a Chinese wall between what national government is doing and the province's role in the very operations and say, that is a national project, because the success of those particular projects depends on the joint work, and it has actually demonstrated itself when we're there. And I appreciate that the officials of the province were there in that farm. That part of the problem has been both the national and the province's role in supporting that particular beneficiary. So I think in our discussion with the national department, we have to understand this particular value chain, because there is no way that you're going to have some a project which comes from national and it gets to be supported in terms of farmer support by the province, whether through CASIDRA. Then we sit and say, no, we cannot answer because that's a project of national. It can't work. It can't work like that. And I think it's something that we must take into cognizance going further. And my last question, Chair, which is a new question, is on the veterinary services. On what has been put in the report currently on the quarter two, I think it is indicated that also you know, the performance at that level, you know, is quite good. There's one issue I wanted to understand actually on the revenue side, both on the research and the veterinary, because I'm assuming that both are the ones where the department is able to get paid services, you know, both through the veterinary services and, if I'm not mistaken, and the research. Can we just get some understanding that when it comes to the veterinary services, what are some of those services which are paid, you know, and who pays? Is it the municipalities or the individual farmers which were to ask the vet services of the province? Is that how it works? And also on the research side, which are some of those research services, you know, that gets to be paid from or by whoever to the Department of Agriculture? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ngondlo. Honorable Stoffel.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, let me appreciate Member Nkondlos because she have covered me 100% in terms of the issue of the farm of Middle Drift. Thank you very much for that, Member Nkondlo. Chair, in terms of Amalistein and the rightful beneficiaries, I'm not comfortable with that. I know the department is not here to try to satisfy me, but I don't think the response in terms of the question of the rightful owners of the farm is really on. It's not on. The reason why I'm saying that, Chair, 25 years back, when I arrived in Canaland, that was this issue of these rightful beneficiaries of that farm. And the department and CASIDRA have worked together and they have promised the people of that area that that farm will land into the rightful owners. Last year, Chair, when we started in the legislature, it was a burning issue, Chair. and the same Casitra have promised they are about to the finalization of the process of the rightful owners. Today, to my disappointment, the same Casitra is saying it will by 2030. By 2030, that rightful owners will, all of them will be maybe no more there. I don't think there is a really accurate report pertaining this issue from Casitra. But what we have noticed now as we speak, there is some weird people that we don't know where they come from, who claim they are the rightful owners. Now, if Casitra is still struggling in terms of identifying the rightful owners of the farm or the rightful whatever, they must say so that we can then request assistance for them in terms of resolving that matter on the farm. Because what is going to happen now, those people are going to fight amongst each other because of this chaos that is caused by Casitra and the department. So I think there should be really a proper investigation into this matter so that the rightful owners, because now the farm is operating 100%. And I want to know who's benefiting then from the farm if the rightful owners doesn't benefit from the farm. So, Chair, I'm not really in a comfortable zone about this issue. And I believe, as we speak, those people of that farm, of that area, they are listening to us. Because Casitra was there now recently. The people is still waiting for them to come back to them. So, Chair, I think what really needed to be done here is to say Casitra must come with a proper presentation of that specific farm. The milk, everything is going nicely on the farm. Even the people of that area is not benefiting in terms of the milk that is being produced on that farm at a lower price. They are not. Nothing is being sold to the people of the farm. Everything is going to the factories, is going because it's about profit. Who's benefiting from that profit? Not the rightful owners. I want to pause there, Chair. But thank you very much for allowing me to participate. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Stoffel. I just want to indicate that we have got a resolution in terms of Amalian stain. So we will be visiting, and I think members will obviously, acquaint themselves with the situation there on the farm and ask the relevant questions there. So in our program, I think we've got dates set up maybe, in the beginning of the year to do that. So I thought it's very important to just outline that. With regards to, and I'm going to really talk to it, and I know HOD would also maybe talk to it. With regards to Metal Boss, I think we have to respect the national mandate and the provincial mandate. Is a constitutional mandate that obviously we have to be careful of overstepping what our roles are in terms of managing these entities. So with the separation of the department, agriculture and land reform and rural development, and I think it could be a tricky one. I just wanted to point to that, very, very important, because we've got a role to play in terms of really overseeing the food security and overseeing the support extension services and so forth. So that's where I really want to urge the department to play their active role in ensuring that they provide the extension services and they provide support where it's needed. But I don't think that we need to overstep the role of the department. When I say we, I mean the department and ourselves as the committee, overstep, in terms of our mandate in that regard. Thank you. Over to you, HOD.
Chair, thanks. I want to start by saying I agree with Member Nkondlo fully. I don't think the two of us are differing in terms of what the problem is. I think the point of discussion is how to solve the problem. Agriculture is part of the solution, but it's not the only solution. And I guess that's the point I was making. Agriculture contributes to the solution, but it is not the only solution. And I think in South Africa, the challenge is each time we talk food security, everybody think agriculture. I guess that's the message I was trying to put forth to the committee. And there's enough literature from BFAP, even international literature around exactly what I'm saying, that agriculture is part of the solution, but it's not the only solution, because we know exactly what the issues are in our country. And I think the question on impact studies, I think we have done 2 such studies already. And if those had not been shared with the committee, I'm happy to bring the results of those studies again to the committee. In fact, I think we are due for the next one in probably a year or two's time to follow up on that study, because every 5 years we embark on those studies, because we are equally concerned about the impact not only of that program for food security, but all our programs at the department. With respect to the revenue, I think the VETs is in particular the export certificates, which is paid for by the businesses themselves, and some laboratory tests, which are also paid for by the users. Of course, we spend about 2.7 million every year, where we provide free services to smallholder farmers through the lab. In terms of those tests, they don't pay for those particular tests. In the space of research, is in particular around the soil analysis work, but also we sell some ostriches once a year. We sell ostriches from our research farm in Oudtshoorn. But of course, the bulk of it is from the student fees in Program 7, the college. That's really what generate revenue for us as a department. With regards to the farms, I want to leave it at the point where the chair said the committee will be visiting the farms in the new year. I think it's probably a good thing that that should happen. But I think for us, we have got lots of lessons in South Africa about what collapsed land reform is, whereupon you've got groups of people running businesses. There's enough literature as to why and how those farms had failed elsewhere in the country. And the argument we've been making, and painfully so, is to say for us to advise this committee that those farms are transferred, it must be given to an entity, not a group of people, because group of people will not run a business, but we want to empower the community into an entity that will run that business. That is our advice to the committee, but in the end, I think we would hate to not advise the committee correctly, because our duty is to advise you correctly so that the right decisions are made and we don't become a statistic in terms of farms that are handed out, and before you know it, there is nothing to show. So that is the issue, and I think I would agree, Chair, that perhaps Casidra must come with a detailed presentation even before you visit, and possibly outline what are the challenges, because there are big numbers of money that are needed to turn some things around in that farm before we give it to community. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you again, Chairperson and Member Nkondlo. Maybe just to go back to the question on the rollover, to clarify, I think in general, the principle of rollover is that firstly, you must try and keep it as low as possible. When you apply for rollover, you also have to provide the Treasury with actual evidence of your commitment. So it has to be committed expenditure. And they are very strict in terms of the rules that apply as guided by the PFMA and DORA, etc. So that's the first thing. So as you can imagine, there would be expenditure that you have to settle and incur very soon or early in your new financial year that you had committed already in the latter part of your previous year. So what happens then is you basically spending from your own allocation of your new year, up until such time that you get that approval of the rollover, and it is then added to the adjustments budget of your following year. So that's just a general principle. In the case of the disaster funding, because it was such a high amount, of course, the department would not be able to spend its own funding on to that value. So that's why we did not incur any expenditure until such time that we received the approval from National Treasury in June. So we had to wait for purely from a cash flow perspective. We do not have that amount of cash to spend before we have approvals. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, CFO. CEO Casidra, do you want to respond with regards to Amalian's thing?
Chairperson, no, I think the HOD has I also agree. We will do a proper presentation. I think in the end, we are running a farm on a shoestring budget. That farms are not profitable. I think it's clear it's not profitable because we're funding it through the fiscus. So it's the farms at this stage are not making money. We are bringing it to a point where it will make money. So I think to come to a point where we sell milk at lower prices and things to the community makes no sense at this stage. At this stage, we want to capture market, make sure that the project is actually making money, and then we can move towards social development. At this stage, we want the business to work and want the business to flourish, and we have to make sure that we actually firstly establish that. So I just wanted to leave it at that. I think we will come and do a proper presentation on the dates that you set for us. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, honourable members. I see Honourable Stoffel's hand is up. I'm going to allow the last round of questions, and then we go into the presentation from Ndadis. But what I want to point out is that the studies that was done regarding the profitability of farms indicated that 40% of the profitable farm were as a result of subsidies. So they made a profit out of subsidies. So I want to leave that at the back of your mind in terms of engaging around this farms that are really facing challenges. Honourable Stoffel, your hand is up. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, maybe we must also establish a Madlanga Commission here, the Western Cape, when it comes to these farms. This farm doesn't exist since yesterday. This farm is coming almost 25 years that I'm here, and this farm still never generated money. Where's the money of this farm that was being generated since it was being established there to benefit, let a community benefit? Where's this money? And no one can account about these things. Even the equipment on the farm, no one. There's no one who can give us that report to say what happened to the tractors that was there, what happened to the winery that was on the farm, what happened. Maybe we must establish that, so that there must be people who must go to jail if they have to go and account for that. But that's not on the expense of our people. Then, Chair, I wanted to check in terms of these food security gardens. I've heard that one member there reported that 45% goes to the metro of that food garden. I agree, it's needed. But what about the other areas? Can they tell us how many percentage out of that 100% goes to the rural areas? That is the only question I'm worried of. And that I couple it what Member Nkondlo have mentioned, to say our people is dying from hunger here, where we are, especially in the rural areas. There's no unemployment, there's unemployment, there's no jobs, there's no. Now I want to know from that 100%, 45 is for metro. how much other percentage is for the rural areas? And when I'm talking about rural areas, I'm talking all the areas, even after the toll gate, and even in the West Coast, that areas. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Stoffel, my math tells me that, Honorable Stoffel, I say my math tells me there's 55% left after the 45% is allocated to Metro. But over to you, CEO, to the question of Honorable Stoffel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think maybe the right answer for me now would be we will give a proper breakdown in terms of where that projects are being implemented. If you allow us, obviously I don't have that information in front of me right now, so we will be able to share that information to you, Chairperson, if you allow us.
Thank you, CFO. I mean CEO and CFO from Casidra, and the most important man, Mr. Michael. Michael, do you wanna maybe answer?
No, Chair. I think if 45% goes to the metro, then 55% go to the rural areas. That include Swartland, Little Karoo, Garden Route, Central Karoo. And I can assure, Chair, from the food security perspective, that Little Karoo currently have the most approved projects, food security projects implemented in Duiselsdorp. It's in Uniondale, it's in Oudtshoorn, and I can provide, Chair, the committee with the areas and projects that been approved and implemented in Little Karoo, Chair.
Thank you very much. What I just wanted to say is that we are going to excuse you if you want to leave. We will proceed with the Department of Agriculture, but I see the HOD doesn't want you to leave, which I concur with him. HOD, over to you in terms of the presentation regarding the ideal budget.
My CFO can fly for the members to see. Up front, I want to say that this process is not scientific that we followed. And the structure of the department was approved in 2009 and 10 financial year. So we based it on that structure, which is about 14 years ago. And
sorry, HOD, we
yes,
just
please.
want to get the slide for our colleagues online so that they can follow. The projector seems to have been switched off. I don't know if that has to do with the online.
Yeah, they can see.
The projector off.
They must ask, they can see it.
Can honorable members online, can you see the presentation?
I can see, Chair.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes,
I think
we can.
Thank you. I think we're going to proceed in that order because we've got presentation here in the house, so we can use the hard copy. You can proceed, CFO. Oh, yeah.
Chair, she's delegating. Thank you very much. I was saying it's not scientific because the structure was approved in 29-10 financial year. And I can assure you that things have changed 14 years later. So if we were to do another org structure of the department, it might say we need about 2,000 plus people. At the time, we needed 1,600 people in 2010. So that is the basis. I thought I must just put that up front. So the first slide is really about the priorities of the executive authority. which is what we call ABFM, agriculture support, business support, food security and nutrition, as well as market access. And in our view, agriculture is an economic cluster department, and therefore it must contribute to the growth for jobs strategy of the Western Cape. With its 7 priority focus areas. And in particular, we're looking at focus area number 1, that is investment. And that is where we leverage about 100 million rands of the private sector investment into agriculture through the commodity approach system, which I'll talk to at a later stage. But of course, PFA 2, which is about exports. Members would know that about 8 of the 10 exportable products of the Western Cape have got an agricultural foundation. So this sector plays a very important role in that regard. Of course, PFA 4, water security and resilience, we are also involved there through our ecological infrastructure work. And of course, in terms of tech and innovation and employability of persons, we are quite involved in the PFA 7 and PFA 5. The next slide, really, it's about how do we link the priorities of the minister with the priorities of the Western Cape government in terms of the PSP. We are linking to the G4J and as well as the EHEX. It's not well-being anymore, it's called EHEX. It's educated, healthy and caring society, as well as safety. And of course, it's underpinned by innovation, culture and governance, which is quite important for us. The next slide really is to show the members that agriculture is, in our view, trade. And if you look at what happened last year, we exported approximately 14 billion rands, 14 billion US dollars of export by the agricultural sector. And if you go on a straight line that 58% of what is exported by RSA comes from this region, you can actually extrapolate that. That is the value of the exports. And then, of course, exports exceeds imports, and that's what you want, because you want your balance of payment to be positive. The next slide comes from BFAP, Bureau for Food and Agriculture Policy, a really solid think tank for agriculture in South Africa. And I think the point we're making there is that agriculture has outperformed the rest of the economy over the years since 2000 until 2024. We're performing much better than the rest of the economy. And we think that's the argument we also want to raise with the committee, that agriculture, in our view, in South Africa, is not correctly funded. But if you look at its performance, it's quite a solid performance. Of course, on the right, we're raising some of the external factors that affect agriculture. And for me, the key one is the issue of animal diseases and biosecurity. And I think members may be aware of the challenges we have now with foot and mouth, which is something that we never thought will come to us based on what we have been doing. But some rogue persons decided to do and lend us to where we are now. And I think we're doing what we need to do with the national agriculture to take them to task, because we think it's important that government must also be shown, be seen to be leading in that area. The next slide is really what we call a systems map, which we prepared when we were preparing for our strategic plan for this 5 years. But I think the message there is just to demonstrate how complex the agriculture system is, and the fact that there are so many other subsystems that agriculture or farmers need to comply with, and that's how complicated it is, and that's the complex myself and the team and the entire sector need to walk through to ensure that in the end we produce the food that everybody eats, but also we export 14 billion US dollars if you look at last year as a baseline. The next slide is about the impact statement, and we think that our impact statement, which is also in our strategic plan, is to grow the number of the Western Cape residents who are able to feed themselves and their families with dignity and are able to do so sustainably. And if you unpack that statement, you will clearly see that it is linked to the growth for jobs, because in there we're talking about 600,000 jobs, and we believe that's what we need to do, and we are committed to to do that. There are 82 indicators in the department now, but those 5 blocks they indicate what we call flagship indicators. Number 1 is we want to increase production. The second one is market access and exports, food safety and food security, ecological infrastructure and river protection works that also respond to issues around climate change. And of course, the last issue is resilient rural economies. The issue that Member Stoffel was talking to, it's important for us that these rural communities are made to become resilient and able to feed themselves and grow their own regions. In terms of the budget for the vote, in the current year, we're sitting with 1021.484 billion rands. And next year, we're looking at 1052,793, and it goes on to 1097,501 in 2027-28. And I think the message there that I want to bring to the committee is that the COE increase by 5.5% is far above the percentage increase of our budget in the 3 years. And of course, that expenditure increased by 4.5 over the MTEF. It's again higher than the average increase for the budget of the department. Now, in terms of the budget allocation per program, this is in the APP as indicated as such. COE is about 518, and the goods and services is 212. Transfers is 253, and then capital 36. And it adds to 1021 billion, which is the budget of the department. With respect to the COE, I indicated that when the structure was drawn in 2010, it indicated we needed about 12 persons on the structure. And since that time, the department has never been able to fill the 1612 org structure because of financial reasons. And sitting here, I don't even believe that in the next 5 years, given the fiscal reality and the economic climate in our country, that will ever be able to fill 1612 persons in terms of the structure. But if you look at 2010, we're about 946 persons. And in 2025, we're sitting currently at 899, which is about 56% of the approved structure. This is how we operated in the last 15 years, if you like. And obviously, if the committee is able to do some things to help us, we really appreciate it, because that's really a lot of people are even to double up because we don't have enough people on the ground to do the work that they have to do. If you look at the cost of employment and status and implications, I think we responded to this in terms of the COE is 518, and key appointments cannot be made in some areas. For instance, the vets, the engineers, and in the extension services, for instance, they operate with only 50%. Right there, we need to have about 120 extension officials, and I think we're sitting with exactly 65 thereabouts. SMS team, 33% is unfunded. So the 18 members that I have on my structure are having to pull up and even to double up in a number of areas. Of course, salary levels of professional posts are not market related, and therefore it becomes difficult at times to attract and retain persons. Of course, the one other issue is the aging of my staff. About 21% of staff are between 55 and 64, and members would be aware of the latest DPSA regulation about early retirement. And my fear is, I hope that people are not going to leave mass exodus, because there are some people that we can't afford to lose. And we're just hoping, and I think we have tight deadlines. I think in the next 2 weeks, we need to make those decisions, and at times we'll have to say no to some people that may want to exit. So in some areas, for instance, in the research area, 73% of their budget goes to COE, and in the vets, 81%, which is quite unhealthy. And in the college, about 68% of their budget goes to COE, and that's very, very unhealthy. And there are no trade-offs because of the pressures that are across the programs, and I think what it does, it affects the well-being of staff. One of the values of this government is the care value or the caring value, and but we find ourselves in this kind of space. That is why this Friday, Chairperson, my team will not be working. We have what we call well-being day, where upon people can just go and play sport and do whatever they like on the day at Elsenburg. For us, that's a way of really looking after staff, because they are pulling so much weight, as you can imagine. In terms of the ideal budget, Chairperson, I indicated initially that there was no scientific process that we followed, because if we had to follow science, we need to redo the org structure of the department. But based on the allocation of 1021, we think if you look at this year in particular, we would need about 651 million extra on our budget. So our budget should be about 1.6 billion for the year based on the current reality. And I must indicate again, there was no scientific process here, because to follow science, you must go and do an org structure. And also, you must also look at program number 3. I think is the one that takes the lion's share there in terms of the difference, about 431 million rands. And this is based on the applications we received against the budget that was allocated for. And now there are a number of risks that the department has to contend with every year. The first one is really about the cost of must pays. These are based on my allocation of 1021 billion. 100 million of that must go to must pays. That's electricity, that's water, that's security, because we are out at the farm. And obviously we don't get some of the centralized services in the city. So that's quite a chunk. Increased disasters, of course, climate change has taught us we've had fires, floods, droughts in the last 10, 14 years. And that's the reality that we are confronted with. And I think at the extreme right, we also indicated what are the mitigating mechanisms that we have employed over the years to deal with those issues. Of course, the third point we raise in there is that we rely heavily on conditional grants. And I can tell the members that this is the reality across the country. Every other province relies on conditional grants. And I think that's something that if this committee was to help us, it's to really get to the point where the conditional grant becomes part of my provincial equitable share, because it gives me enough space to do what I need to do on time and assist farmers as and when the needs arise. So that's the third particular risk. The fourth one is the reduced funding for subsistence farming. We just spoke about food security and the fact that people need support. In fact, the number we support is probably 50% of the demands that we receive. So we're not at any given time able to assist everybody that needs our support. The next point is about biosecurity and related food safety challenges. The vets have to visit all the abattoirs in the province to monitor and ensure that the meat that everybody eats in the province of the Western Cape is safe. But we have to work with the private sector to do some of that work because we're not commensurate to the need on the ground. Reduced investment in research. This is the one area that I think if we don't continue to invest, it's a major risk for our agricultural sector. We will not be able to compete globally because competition in the globe is about efficiency, and efficiency can only be brought about by science and research. And I think that's a risk. Of course, the next one is access to markets. If we're not able to take our producers to the global stage, they will not be able to gain those markets which are now available globally. For instance, some weeks ago, we met with the colleagues from the UAE and as well as the Canadians, and those guys are quite ripe in terms of accepting the Western Cape product, but we need to get to those markets. Of course, insufficient operational budget, particularly at the college. It's if you remember the few slides earlier, I referred to about 68% of their COE, of their budget go to COE, which is quite unhealthy. Safety of our staff, it's a big issue, and we've had to unbrand some of our vehicles in some areas because people target government vehicles in many of these areas. I refer to the aging workforce of the department, about people that are about to retire. And I think that's the challenge. But of course, we're responding to that. We've launched what we call Next Generation Bolt, which is a platform where we are going to recruit I think it's about 20 persons of our staff members who are going to be trained and be exposed. So next time I come to this committee chair, I'll have some members who are not part of the SMS, who are just coming here as part of capacity building and mentorship approach towards increased funding. And I think we dealt with in one of the questions, is the issue around the utilization of provincial assets, of course, the lab, but of course, the utilization of the assets at the college. Minister of Finance calls it about how about sweating some of the our assets so that we can generate revenue. But I think we're starting a process, I think now with the replanting of the vineyards, to look at the extent to which we can sell some of the wine going into the future. But it's an early discussion that we have with the colleagues at Treasury as well as DOI to look at how can we sweat that asset. Of course, the commodity approach will leverage about 100 million per annum to support farmers in the province. We'll continue with that because we think it's a very important partnership, one of its kind in the Western Cape, and I think probably one of the biggest reasons why land reform is not such a poor performing program in the Western Cape. Of course, the PVL, that's a provincial veterinary laboratory. We need to activate some of the scientific tests at the lab that will generate further resources for us. Of course, we're funding with the international colleagues through a structure called MCAP, Mediterranean Climate Action Partnership, whereupon we lobby funding for climate change studies, because we believe that the only way out of climate change is through science, and that means we must embark on research and look at developing, if you like, new farming systems that will be adaptive to the reality. The next slide really just demonstrate the ecosystem that anchors the agricultural sector in the province. And I must say that list is not exhaustive, but it is some of the colleagues that we work with in the Western Cape who provide some support, either in the form of extension services, mentorship to farmers, and in some instances, the blending finance, whereupon, for instance, if you look at Hotfin, for every 1 rand we invest, they were investing 1.40 rand in the last year. And I think that's some of the areas that for us is important. Finally, I think we want to reiterate the impact statement. And of course, the point number 2 is to indicate that we are fully aligned with the provincial strategic plan and its outcomes. And if you look at our budget and unpack it, we can map it for you as to which part of the priority area is allocated to what amount of budget. And of course, the third one, I think the Western Cape agricultural sector, in our view, is quite healthy and very strong and completely resilient. And we also want to believe that the department is healthy and very strong, and it works quite well with the sector. Of course, the issue of protectionism, it's an issue that I think we are confronted with, but I think para-diplomacy is what our minister is engaged on, and in some instances I'm pulled in to look at that, because we believe the only way to deal with protectionism is to work with regions that share our values. And I think Canada is one of those, and the UAE and many others. Value for money. I think we are the only department in South Africa, Honorable Chair, that has done 45 external evaluations with a management improvement plan. There's no one department in this country that has done that. So we've tested all our areas of work, and we have improved through that. Of course, we remain, in our view, the orchard of South Africa as the Western Cape, given the quantum of products that are generated from this region. Of course, the third last point is about data analysis and data integration. is something that the DG of the province had raised sharply with all of us, that we seem to be very strong on data analyzing, but we're not very strong on data integrating. And I think that's something that as a province we need to be looking at. And the second last point is that we need to tell the story of agriculture. And I think we want to appreciate the opportunity you've given us to share these thoughts around what would be ideal budget. And we think that story must be told by all of us. Although everybody and the economists largely tell us that agriculture contributes 3% to the GDP, we want to argue that it's about 14%, and that comes from deep analysis from a think tank of agriculture with the Bureau for Agriculture and Food and Agriculture Policy in the country. That's BFF. And the last really is a quotation. We thought it was appropriate for this discussion from African Development Bank. Top economist there by Mr. Dr. Adesina. He says agriculture is not a development activity or a social sector. Agriculture is a business and must be treated as such to unlock wealth and growth for whatever region. And I think in this province, I think we've got enough evidence of what agriculture has done, and with much funding, I think we can even do much more. But I think there's testament out there of what agriculture has done, 10% to the GDP and about 17% of the workforce. We think that's massive, and that talks to the story of agriculture. Chair, that is in a nutshell what we prepared for this discussion, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, HOD. I see it was quite marathon. You've been sweating, you know. But it was really insightful, really. Thank you very much. And it provoked quite lots of thoughts. And I think one is that the minister, during the appropriation bill in the previous year, this year, she did mention that, you know, if your business plan is really sound, then I will support. So maybe an opportunity to put this business plan case to the Minister of Finance to really support your case. But I think also, you know, what I pick up here is that, you know, we got to really scale the public-private partnership, you know, to another level, to a new level, you know, because I think there are real opportunities within, you know, agriculture. There's also transversal, you know, issues that really can, if you work with them quite well in agriculture as well, you might find yourself, you know, quite ahead in terms of the production and economic contribution. So, honorable members, we are left with very limited minutes. I am going to allow, you know, one round of questions, if you can really keep them crisp to the point, so that we move to the next 2-3 items as quickly as possible. Honorable members, with a show of hands, I see Honorable Gondlo, Honorable Constable online, Honorable Van Wyk in the house. In that order, we can start online. Honorable Gondlo.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And it's so unfortunate that we do not have sufficient time, because this is one of the most important conversation we ought to have in this, you know, financially constrained times, where also the state's role in the economy is so much under scrutiny. So I would think, Chair, we may need to then say, if we cannot have the conversation now, let's rather defer this conversation for another time, because there are particular things that the HOD is raising on how, one, we can reposition the conversation about, you know, the standing of agriculture in the economy and as part of the GDP contributor, let alone some of the areas the HOD, like on how grant funding could actually be part of the equitable share. So these are conversations we need to get into, Chair, and I don't think we're going to have sufficient time, as you had already put up a disclaimer of time pressures. So I want to make that suggestion, because I would have wanted to gain, you know, also insights from the HOD around the business models that have been used by the agri sector and whether those business models, actually fair and just, because also the other side of agriculture that we're not talking about is actually the exploitation of labor, the cases that we're still having and some of the challenges that we're finding in that sector. But let alone that is actually how data, how AI, with the new technologies that are coming into the space, how are those things supposed to be utilized, to ensure that we innovate with agriculture so that the old models of operating the industry, are going to be taken over by AI. What are some of the things as government we could actually assist, the agri sector, to try and move with speed, but in the process be inclusive in the manner in which agribusiness gets to be undertaken. So for me, I think I would have wanted more conversation along those particular lines and get some insight from the HOD of what they've been picking up also in the global stage where they're engaging with some of the developed economies to understand how can we improve, this very important sector, that is required by the economy, which I support the notion that says we ought to lobby and advocate for a better repositioning of agriculture. That for me is not an issue. For me, I think what is important are some of the issues that we must look at within the agri sector itself.
Thank you, Honorable Ngondlo. Honorable Constable.
Chair, thank you very much. Chair, I'm totally covered by Member Ngondlo because this is really a very interesting conversation. If you look at the COE that the HOD talked about, market-related salaries, as well as the aging staff, that is a very critical component for discussion. Because the question I always raise is, what is the succession plan? But even if they have a succession plan, look at the number of employees they need to get to that 1,600 per. There is a massive difference with regards to employees in that specific department. So I totally agree with Member Conda, as well as the conversation with regards to conditional grant. That was part of the equitable share. I think, Chair, let's have another conversation just on what was presented now, and also the college. The MEC was very defensive. I think 2 weeks ago when we dealt with the annual report with regards to the college and how National wants to assist and to intervene, and he said no, it belongs to Western Cape province. But if you look at the amount of money, then one then start to think otherwise. And I know this is not the right platform or the right time to talk about it. But for me also, can we then take this conversation and give maybe a whole day just to talk about this kind of presentation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honourable members. Honourable Van Wyk.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, certainly. I think it's this type of presentation that certainly excites me, and I think it's a business case. You should be out there in the bank and go and sell your department to the banks now, and say you want a 600 million rand investment, and I suppose the question is, to what extent does one grow the revenue base? In other words, in agriculture, that I suppose is what the question is. I think we're going to have to think a little bit differently than hoping it's going to come by the grant system at this stage. I suppose what I immediately think of is through clusters, where and you could take whichever little emblem you have in terms of the various sectors and saying to them, well, you guys now need to go around with a hat and you need to contribute on your own side whatever is your share of the 600 to make this thing work, and create that type of structure. as to where one goes. But once again, agriculture is going to say, well, these are the conditions. We need an element of greater certainty and policy certainty to be able to do that. I think you very clearly put out on your the volatility that agriculture faces, and it remains resilient. So with all of the climate issues, with all of the drought issues, with the world prices, with and everything that happens with it, agriculture is still able to produce. So somehow they are able to work through that system, which I think is a very positive point of view. But I would agree we need to talk about this separately and have a detailed discussion. But certainly, I think you need to probably get some of the big farmers, to break the door down when you go and visit the Premier and visit the Minister of Finance in saying that you want the money. But
by the way, he's the chair. He must approve.
These are the type of things that are going to be the game changers to me in G4J. Is what we do, and how does one pull that the private sector in? And I could also see in my time in George, for instance, when we went into COVID, there were certain farmers who then needed to do exports. And I knew the amount of running around and phone calls I made, for instance, just to get farmers the permits to be able to fly to parts of the country in getting their exports moving. So that initiative is there among the farmers. That it's a number of switches that one has got to pull, and we need to get there. And I've always felt that from a cluster exercise, clusters worked very well around the world, but somehow we haven't quite got to the maximum of what we're doing. It maybe we're starting to see the inkling now in what is taking place. For instance, citrus. I'll take citrus as an example. What's happening in avocado in certain areas, what's happening in berries in certain areas. So, I think a lot of that is starting to happen, and our whole cooperative market or the cooperative industry, has become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more collaborative and smarter. And it's a matter of how we pull that together. But fantastic for what you've done there. 10 out of 10 for doing this. And I think this is the type of thing that I also would like to see from a budget committee point of view, that we actually start challenging the system here. And the only way we're not going to get it in a hurry out of the tax base. Somebody's going to have to do this, and it will flow into the tax base eventually. Thank you very much.
Honorable Van Wyk, you've been too generous, 10 out of 10. Anyway, honorable members, I feel exactly the same with regards to really spending time to engage thoroughly with the presentation with the department. We have noted serious concerns with regard to safety in terms of visiting Philippi. The procedural officer did indicate to me that there are concerns, and there are obviously concerns from the department as well as from members. We don't have the final report, but if that is the case, that from the PPS that we might not really be executing that visit, we will instead have a visual engagement with regards to this presentation. Is that okay, honorable members? Can we make that a request to the department to just avail themselves so that we can engage on the presentation. Thank you, honorable members. So in that, with that said, I think we're gonna end the presentation, the deliberation on this particular presentation. Through our procedural officer, we will obviously communicate to you as to, going forward. So what I'm going to do is that I will allow you, HOD, for your closing remark and the CEO, and we will then proceed with the next part of our agenda. And then we'll also do the thank you once you have done your closing remarks.
Chair, thanks very much. I don't have they say in Afrikaans lang tong. So I just want to thank you and the members and thank you for challenging us to look at an ideal budget. I think it was also exciting for us to do that work. And I think Minister of Finance is waiting for us. We will be going to her and we'll share the same presentation with her outside the MTech processes. And but of course, as a sector, and as Honorable Van Wyk has indicated, the sector is ready. The farmers invest all the time. In fact, we may be the only state department that leverage 100 million of private sector resources to augment government investment. And I think with that track record, we are ready to go on and seek more as we together build the Western Cape that we want and grow the numbers of jobs that we want to see in our region. Chair, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to my team as well for being here.
Thanks, Chairperson. Obviously, I don't want to speak too much after the HOD, but no, thank you from our side. Thank you, Chairperson and members for allowing us this opportunity. Obviously, we understand there's a lot of things that we need to do to improve, and we understand that that especially the farms are touch points that we need to sort out, and we will obviously from our side make sure that we present that full report and also provide all the transparency that's required so that people can come and see what is happening on the farms. We think that there's a good turnaround on the farms, and but as I say, I think there's also a lot of work that needs to be done there. And yeah, we want to thank the department as well, HOD and his team who supports us and make sure that we are able to deliver. And yeah, so thank you, Chairperson. Thank you.
Really, thank you very much to the department, and we really appreciate your availing yourself to us to interrogate your quarterly reports, and as well as your presentation that you have provided us insight with regards to what is adequate funding for your department. We look forward to engaging further at the date that will be communicated to you. Really, thank you very much. You are excused. Honorable members, with that said, I'm just gonna allow maybe 2 minutes leg stretch, and then we can get back to our other part of the agenda. Honorable members, we are first going to consider the resolutions from both CASIDRA and the Department of Agriculture and the presentation that has been provided. And then from there, then we can go to agenda item number 5.1. I mean, which obviously have got 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. By show of hands, any matter that comes to mind for resolutions? Honorable Van Wyk.
Yes, I think, Chair, first of all, I think I must thank the committee, thank you too for getting this initiative that they actually have a vision for themselves. It's something that every department should be doing. And, I sometimes feel within committees and within the departments, there seems to be almost a reluctance to say, how do we push the envelope? And how do we make the game changer that we do? And I think what has been done here is, to me, is quite feasible. I think there's quite a lot that can be sold into the private sector over here in terms of how that participation can be brought about. And I think it is something really fantastic that can be done. So I think that we need to pursue that and find some form of structuring how one holds that meeting. And maybe it is it's almost a vision that should perhaps be unpacked along with the role players from private sector on how do you see the future going, you as the private sector, see to what extent can you participate, in other words, that there's a position paper, for instance, that gets put out and saying, citrus industry or deciduous fruit, whatever we want to talk about there, how do you see you can participate, how one brings them together? And it makes me reflect on a number of years ago, I sat and listened to a lecture that Professor Michael Porter had done, and it's going back a number of years ago that he had done in America in a region in one of the states in saying, how does one bring this greater level of participation of collaboration? And I think it was an hour and a half lecture. And I mean, in that lecture, I think he hardly took a moment to drink a bit of water. It was one of those type of lectures. And we are here in terms of the industry, in terms of the sector, I believe can play a huge role. So it's something that I think we need to think about and what as a committee can be facilitated. So that's what my big take on what today has been.
I think to really appreciate your input. I mean, Leon, you've played quite an important role in education, in bringing some of the private sector to assist in collaborating with the government to build some of the private schools. So your input will definitely be welcomed there. But I think also, to the point of Honorable Ngondlo, with regards to the food security and how do we look at the entire value, food system, because transversal parts need to be taken care of, because if we just look agriculture in isolation, I think we're gonna really not make it. Agriculture cannot just go alone with blinkers, that I'm agriculture, this is what I do. And I think we need to start having this conversation of the entire system. How do you get the whole system, to work together to ensure that we deal with food security effectively? Agriculture is but part of the entire system, but how do we really get the entire system to work together? But that's a conversation for maybe, when we engage with the department later. I see the hands of Honorable Ngondlo and Stoffel. Yeah, I think let's just maybe to the point with regards to resolutions, and then we can maybe, use this kind of debate that I've just gotten into philosophical, matters when we meet the department again. I think I'm also, quite excited. I need to chair now the meeting. Honorable Ngondlo, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps part of what yourself, Chair, and the coordinator are going to have to try and help guide us on is actually on how time, as a resource gets to be used in this committee to help us engage on matters of interest that have been raised and brought to ourselves to the best of our ability, so that things do not get rushed. So I think it's something that I've been experiencing it across committees, that time is a very scarce resource. Sometimes I don't think we are utilizing it efficiently, to respond to the things that the departments that were oversighting, the issues that were picking up from the public, and in this instance, the agri stakeholders, we are able to ventilate, because we are always having this issue that we've got pressure of time. And I'm raising this in line with the last discussion, because it is us who had asked for the ideal budget. And therefore, we needed to have sufficient time to engage. And as you said, the HOD was rushing, sprintering along this particular presentation, and we have not necessarily been able to engage it. And now, even now with the time on the resolutions, it's once again the same problem. We don't have enough time. I would want to support the notion that says, let us find the time where the HOD with the department comes back, and perhaps in coming back, members, if there are specific issues, both in the presentation of the HOD and things that he may not have covered, we actually use this time to write to yourself and the committee coordinator, so that you consolidate those, so that it can enrich the second round of engagement on this matter with the department, because we are at a time of very difficulty, and it's globally. And I think the private sector, which we always want to, prioritize when we speak and the economy, is always ahead. And that is why sometimes it's easy for it to even recruit some of amongst us, to be, their spokesperson in the public sector, because it's always ahead of what are the reforms that must take place in the agri sector, what are some of the threats, of the industry, in a globalizing world. And indeed, we can invite those stakeholders to further talk, because we need to say, what is it that we would have ushered as this particular committee, in the quest of the reforms that are taking place globally. And we're seeing the protectionism that the HOD is talking about is indeed affecting agriculture. It's not only the biggest market, which has been the US to us, even the new markets that we're talking about are also looking at how they could still, whilst they would be open and liberalize their economies, but they will always be interested in some of the areas where, their own economies become stable. And for me, that is the conversation. It is about a conversation of a country that has got capacity to produce food, from an agricultural point of view. But how do we balance that, and that corporate responsibility or social responsibility that says we can't be producing food, but we're having people just in our bags who are food hungry. How do we explain that? How do we have a booming agri industry in the country, in the world, that is actually unable to feed? So in this concept, which I support, of food systems, we must understand where exactly are the problems in our own domestic food systems. Where do we assist? Because the agri sector is not only, the commercial side of things. Yes, the people that are doing business must do business, but the role of the state is always about enabling. The role of the state is to create, a redistributive type of benefit of natural resources, including land where the actual agriculture is taking place. So I'm saying we need that particular conversation, and I would love for actually us to take this conversation and make this one of our projects as this particular standing committee, where we can actually even open up on our own to engage both, the commercial farmers, those that have been farming, the emerging farmers, because we also need to know new ways of doing agriculture that is actually inclusive, that takes into cognizance majority of people that have been excluded in agriculture for years in this country and in this province, including the young ideas of young people, who would want to think of ways of still producing food, but in a much more cheaper and just manner. So this, I think, would be a very interesting program if it will be led by this particular committee. So I think let's think outside of the box and actually bring back the department so that it helps us to understand some of the issues, that we may not in the economics of the agriculture. And lastly, Chair, I think I've made my suggestions in terms of the information one that requires is the impact studies that the HOD said are available around the notion of the food garden. And indeed, the issue of food security is something that we need the department together with CACIDRA to actually sit with us and we discuss this matter of what is food security in the Western Cape, what is the extent of this problem, where is it, and what is the contribution of agriculture. And the HOD is correct. It is not the agriculture itself that can contribute in the solution, but agriculture is part of the problem, and like many other sectors, it must therefore play its role, and we need to do that in driving what are some of the things that agriculture can actually contribute to the solution of food insecurity. So I would want us to think about it, even if we start that conversation next year with the department together with CACIDRA, and whether the notion of food gardens, is it sufficient? Can we think of something outside of the food gardens? But if evidence shows that these food gardens are actually helping in those particular households, can we scale them up? Is there something else that we could do with those food gardens, including these public-private partnerships we're always talking about? How can it also help to contribute around food security initiatives that could actually be done with the private sector, to actually respond directly to some of these communities where, including the farm workers that are food insecure?
Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. Honorable Stoffer.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I just want to verify with you or check with you whether that issue of what is this? CACIDRA has been officially registered to say they are going to come back and give us a presentation. I just want to confirm that. And then also, Chair, I think there was a proposal from Member Nkondlo. There is a need for these 3 departments or maybe 4 departments to come together or to the committee. And we have a proper discussion. How are we going to deal with this issue of farms, state farms, whether it's been allocated by through national government or provincial government or whatever? But I think there's a need for us to invite the minister's office, the rural municipalities, and then also agriculture itself within the province, so that we can have a discussion. Because now currently we are sitting with these state farms where no one wants to take responsibility because of this farm was not being allocated by them to the owners. And we are sitting with an issue of land for our small farmers, whether it's in the municipality area, whether it's there. What are we going to do with our small farmers within our areas? They can't, they don't, there's no land for them to have a proper or to have an opportunity for them to hold in livestock. So as a department, there's those departments, we need to be clarified as a province how to deal with this matter. So I don't know how the committee or how can I put it, but I believe there is a need for that engagement with that various departments. Thanks, Chair.
Noted, Honorable Stoffel. So, honorable members, just to respond on the question of engaging the department further. Yes, I think the decision is we are almost, let's say, 50% sure that we might be having the department instead of going to Philippi. There is a security threat, so we will have enough time to really deliberate on what the department has put forward to us. Yeah, and I think on the issue of the time, yeah, we get allocated through programming authority. But maybe you are right. We definitely maybe need to look at how we allocate time, especially from the department side, so that we can engage thoroughly. So if members, allow us to maybe going forward to just give the department, fewer minutes, 10 minutes to just really give an overview, and then obviously we'll take that the members have read the presentation, and then it will allow us to just really engage the department. So with that said, I think those are the resolutions that have been received. I note that Honorable Ngontlo's hand is still up. Is it a legacy hand? I take it as a legacy hands. Honorable members, we had three items to look at, but I think we will defer this to. It's just the adoption of the minutes of the proceedings of the previous sitting and the report of the committee. Can we we can defer it to our next meeting so that we can really go through them thoroughly. Sorry. No, our Philippi meeting. So the next matter that I wanted to notify members of this committee is an invitation by Crew Life at Sea. Crew Life at Sea recruit young members to go on cruise and work on cruise. They are inviting us for a, take us through a ship that will be docking on the 18th. So we'll have opportunity to go inside the ship and really talk to us about, their contribution, in terms of job creation and obviously skills development, internship, and pathways of youth employment in the cruise or hospitality sector. So the invitation is for the 18th, Tuesday, 2025. I will send you the email. Is immediately after our meeting, which is taking place between 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So we've got a time slot here of 12:30 to 13:30. So, but you will receive it via email. With that said, really, thank you very much. The meeting is duly adjourned. Honorable